So I want to talk here for just a short bit of time about a post-flop hand analysis using PioSolver. And using the example here that I have, it comes from a vlogger on YouTube, Andrew Eevee. I believe I'm saying that correctly. Great channel, very entertaining to watch when he posts. He was covering a hand from the deleted scenes vlog 25, about maybe the 10-minute 45-second mark, 11-minute mark. In the hand, he just kind of showed some questions or kind of talked about some decisions and some of the processes that he went through. But specifically, the hand was the 10 of hearts, the 9 of hearts, and then he dealt with a board that flopped 10 of clubs, 7 of clubs, 3 of hearts, and then he had a turn 7 of hearts, river 5 of spades, and then lost top pair to opponents ace of diamonds, 10 of diamonds, so he just got outkicked with a better 10. So you can watch it, go over there, subscribe, follow. I think it's extremely entertaining. But we're just going to talk through the hand and look at his actual bet sizes and actual actions, and then I'll relay a couple comments in here. So going through and doing this in PioSolver, Andrew's exact hand, he opens in early position, and then goes ahead, opens for 40, and then gets called out of both blinds. So when we look at the post-flop analysis here in PioSolver, the first thing that we do in the post-flop tree building and calculations, we set up our basic ranges. So by default, I'm going to go ahead and give Andrew this range. All pocket pairs with your smaller pocket pairs to a smaller frequency. Let me go ahead and make this full screen. There we go. All pocket pairs with your smaller pairs at a low frequency. All of your suited broadways that can make a royal. I think your reasonable offsuit broadways does include king queen. And then he also mentioned going ahead. We know his exact hand of 10-9. 10-9 suited, but he also mentioned he raised a little bit larger, so I kind of figured this might be a spot where he's just doing something a little bit differently, maybe as part of a mixed strategy. So went ahead and gave him some of these hands. 10-9 suited is in there, then maybe Jack-9, 8-9, 9-7, or 8-7 suited would be in there at some frequency, certainly a little bit lower than 100% or all the time as part of this range. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down. Let's look at the out of position player. So it's a little interesting because in this instance he actually has two players calling out of the blinds. But I went ahead and I have another GTO Texas Hold'em book that was published in 2013 that has some GTO type ranges for players out of the blinds that would be calling, and even the small blind and big blind, they both had ranges that were very similar to this. So certainly your aces, kings, ace-king suited, those are going to go into kind of a raising range, but then as well too, it's going to go ahead and give you very similar suited broadways, all pocket pairs, connectors, and then your pretty reasonable offsuits. I expanded the two ranges or tried to combine them as best as possible to come up with a reasonable representation, but and this is just what I came up with. So we'll just kind of go with this for now. You can argue or make a case for it should be wider, narrower, so on and so forth, but it's just what we have and what we're going to go ahead and go with. So that being said, we have the actual board that's set up here, so it's going to be the 10 of clubs, 7 of clubs, 3 of hearts. We have the starting pot that Andrew posted in the blog, so 3 players in the pot for 120 effective stacks. This is a 5-10 game at Bellagio, so we're gonna just make the presumption that effective stacks are 1500. And then we have 3 sections down here that's kind of replicated twice for the betting options or the betting opportunities. So on the flop, we're going to go with a third pot bet, 2/3 pot. On the turn, we're going to go with 57%, 80% of the pot, and then on the river, we're going to go with a 80% pot, and then a slight overbet of 120% of the pot, and then 2.5x raise sizes. We do give the turn the option to donk at the same betting intervals or betting sizes, I should say. So we have that in there as well too, and then calculation for rake, and then just in case an all-in threshold would be reached, we have an all-in threshold once we get to a certain part of a certain frequency or certain sizes. But we're not going to worry about that in this in this exact analysis. But that's what we have in there. So this is the basic setup. The main key components here are going to be the range versus range, the board, starting pot, effective stacks, and then how we go ahead and compose our bet sizes here. So what this goes ahead and does is basically, if we click over here, once we're done processing it or we press go, we can see the output from the solver over here, and it computes basically the equilibrium strategy, and also it'll tell you the maximum that the strategies can be exploited for. So once we reach a certain threshold of accuracy, we go ahead and are complete, and we're able to view everything in the browser. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this. Now, the range that we're looking at here is going to be the out of position player, and the out of position player and the actual action that was given here in the hand. Everything starts off with a check, and that's what the solver actually agrees with. So I want to switch to one screen here real quick. This screen, where we have a little more of kind of a rainbow appearance at the root node of the tree, this is a different setup, this is a different analysis, but what I want to show is that when you have multiple options that are here, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many ever, the solver starts giving them equal opportunity. So over here on the right hand side we have 4 options, and they're all broken out quarter, 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 quarter for 100%. So it is when you start the solving process that it goes through and says these are bets, these are checks, these are raises, so on and so forth. So what it has done in the case of the hand that we're looking at with Andrew is it's computed the out of position player, the out of position range, I should say. The out of position range goes ahead and basically checks a significant portion of the time, basically 97% of the time. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll start with the check. We click check up here in the tree. And now we come over here to the imposition decision, which is basically going to be Andrew. So what it's telling us here, or kind of one of the first things we look at, is we look at what our options are, how our options are composed, or how our options are constructed. So we have an 80 bet, a 40 bet, and again this is a 120 pot. It's over here on the upper left hand side, and then we have a check option as well too. So the way that this is composed out of all of our combinations, we have 16.7 combinations, or 10% of the overall range at this exact spot that we're going to be doing an 80 bet. We have a 40 bet with 64.2 combinations, 41, almost 42%, and we have a check option, which is going to be 73.3 combinations, or 47%. So really, if we look at the bet and the check options, these are really going to be, not to say 50-50, but you can see the bet 40 and the check are pretty well balanced here, and then we go ahead and we have kind of these outliers of what the 80 bets are. So one of the things we can look at here is we can say on average, or if we add together the two betting options, certainly greater than 50%. So I think you can make an argument that betting is slightly better than checking. Maybe if you take the 80 bet out, it might come up with a pure 50-50 split, so on and so forth. Hard to say. We'd have to reprocess it and take a look at it. But since Andrew's actual bet was 80, I wanted to go ahead and leave this in here. So one of the things we can look at in the tool is we can look at this through the lens of Eevee, in addition to just kind of what the strategy here, and the strategy is the main window that we're looking at here, and this is basically the strategy of bet and checks, and then the frequency of what we're doing with exact hands here. So one of the things we can do is we can go ahead and look at comparison of Eevee between various options. So let's go ahead and take a look at, let's see here. Well, betting overall is a little bit better than checking, so let's look at the comparison of the two betting options. Now, what's happened here is we basically get this color-coded bar, and I wish the color coding was different. I may see about going ahead and changing this in the setup, but at the very least you can see that white is, I think, going to be more Eevee neutral, and then we have -2, -6, 2, and 6. I wish they color coded a little bit differently, but we can kind of just take the mouse and hunt around a little bit here. We have the 8s. Hopefully this comes through in the recording okay. We have the 8s that are here, and we can kind of see when we hover over the mouse, the right hand side updates here, and we can see that betting 40 is a better overall Eevee option than going ahead and betting 80. Likewise, we go down to 6, we can see that, again, bet is recommended, and we see the very first cell, 6 of spades, 6 of hearts. Bet 40 is a positive 2.5005 compared to the other options, and we can kind of go down here. The differences, because these cells are white, the differences are pretty nominal, but again, if we're looking at it from a pure Eevee, a mathematical perspective, it's going to appear that betting the 40 sizing is better than the 80 sizing as well too. And we can kind of hunt and peck around here. We can pretty much see there's really not too much of a case where bet 80, and I know I'm going a little quick here. If you're really curious, you can kind of pause the video or scroll back as I'm going through here. You can even see top set. Bet 40 is a little bit better of an option than betting 80. Has a slightly higher EV by a small margin. even queen 10, so on and so forth. So there really doesn't look to be too much of a case where the 80 bet has an Eevee advantage over the others. Let's go ahead and take a look at, see here, bet 80 and check. Okay, I think the EVs are going to run pretty close between all the options, but we do see for the most part that checking in here, queen 10 is even better than the 80 option. Check, check, and I'm just really looking for the third item here of all the cells that are on the right. Check, 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 check. Check is even a little bit bigger plus EV option, so we can see that checking is better than the 80 option. So what we're just looking to distill in an extremely quick fashion is, what is the what the best out of all the options are, or what are some of the data, or what are some of the computations behind how the recommendation between the hands are allocated between the buckets, so to speak. So we just don't see a whole lot. I think the point to quickly draw towards here is we just don't see a whole lot going here into the 80 bet sizing, because 40 basically kind of does the job, so to speak. Another way of looking at this, let's see here. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple things. I'm gonna switch back over to the strategy view. There is a couple things when I looked at this in advance that the 80 bet does as compared to the 40 bet. Obviously, if we check, then everyone's range, for the most part, continues forward, the same number of combinations, so on and so forth. I shouldn't say that. I retract that statement. We should have obviously more hands in a betting range as opposed to checking, whereas the root node of out of position checks its entire range in that spot. But one item to look at is when we do go ahead and bet 40, we can see the response from now what is the out of position. Now that we've bet, the out of position player, or the out of position range, is going to be folding 28.14% of its range. So 34 combinations are going to be folded, 61 are going to call, and 26 are going to go ahead and raise to the sizing of 100. If we jump back over here, and let's jump back in our tree, we can look at the 80 bet sizing. We can see that we do pick up more folding combinations. So the larger sizing certainly would strengthen a raising or even a call. Certainly would strengthen a raising or a calling range, but we are going to get more folds to a greater frequency, or more combinations are going to be folded out to the larger bet sizing. But even when we choose the larger bet sizing, top pair, top kicker will come along. Obviously, jacks as an overpair will come along, queens as an overpair comes along. You do start to fold out your overs that could float, but obviously if it's suited with clubs or club draw, it's pretty much coming along. Ace queen of hearts is even going to come along in this spot. So on and so forth. So we can kind of hunt around here and see see what is coming along, so on and so forth. Another way that we can go ahead and break this down. Let's go ahead and look at the range explorer in this spot. So what the range explorer does is it just basically breaks the actual ranges down according to what we're looking at on the strategy. And let's look at this through the lens of Eevee. These are all the combinations over here, and we can kind of basically see, and we just took a look at the Ace-X, King-X, Ace-X and King-X combinations. We can see when we look at the individual cells or the individual combinations through the lens of Eevee, in this very lower right-hand side, you see 3 red cells with 1 green. Well, basically the EV of the Ace of Clubs, Queen of Clubs is obviously much higher than the negative EV that comes out of all the other non-club combinations of ace queen. Likewise, we can, same thing is going to replay itself over and over for these other combinations, and then you can see even these top pairs are getting down to certainly much lower EV compared to other options. But the tool itself does a nice job of color coding out what the kind of what's going on with ranges here. So if we click on, we're looking at all combinations here. If we click on the fold section right here that's in the light blue, we can look at what the folding, what we're going ahead and folding with. So basically we're folding under pairs, third pairs, low pairs, ace highs, king highs is going to be the bulk of the folding ranges. Calling range in this spot, sets certainly can call, over pairs can call, even though the EV, you can kind of see the color coding here goes away from the green down towards kind of the more neutral orangish and yellow colors. Top pair, under pairs, so on and so forth. We have a good number of combinations of calling. Let's see here. Okay? Flush draw will call. Even our ace high combos will call, so on and so forth. And then we can look at what the raising ranges are. So and the raising range has such few combos in it, and it's such a small portion of the range, but it is sets, and then I think those combos are going to balance themselves out between hands that are reasonable bluffs and reasonable draws. But I just want to go ahead and show you that the tool can go ahead and break down the combinations of what's actually going on within the specific buckets of fold, call, and raise in this exact spot. So let's follow the actual line that was taken here. So the actual line was going ahead and started with the root, the flop, out of position checked, in position, went ahead and raised 80. The actual action by ST suited was to do a call. So that exact hand is going to call 77% of the time. So there's that. Let's go ahead and click on call, and now we come to the matrix that allows us to choose various turn cards here. So the actual turn card that came off was the 10 of hearts, and the equilibrium strategy for out of position still states we're just going to go ahead and check. So pretty much not a surprise there. When we do hit the turn, one thing the tool does let us do is look at Eevee comparisons of runouts. So we can go ahead and, in this exact spot for the out of position player, we can go ahead and look to see what the strategy is across all. So the strategy is across all runouts, and basically it looks like for a small sliver of when a jack comes off, I'm guessing that probably completes a lot of straight opportunities within that range. There's a small 20% or less, 20%, 12%, 18%, 12% that would go ahead and bet to that frequency, but pretty much everything is going to be a check there in that exact spot. So we can also look, since we are looking at the out of position player, we can look at Eevee for them. So for their exact hand, and the thought process here is kind of what are good cards, what are bad cards. Anything that comes in and it looks like anything that completes a straight, it certainly is a positive Eevee, or is a good card, so to speak. And then your wheel cards, not good, and then your Broadway cards are not good as well too. So something to look at, and then of course the overall strategy here. So as the hand was played and Andrew described, it went ahead and went an actual check that's here. Now this is kind of interesting, because, and again, we're looking at this through the lens of what the solver computes. Now, because the initial bet sizing here was the 80 sizing that had a small number of hands allocated to it, we just don't have a lot of combos. In fact, the actual line, this actual line occurs way up here on the upper right hand side, occurs 4.3% of the time, given all of the possible combinations or things we can do up to this point. So basically, in the solver at this point, we have 280 in the pot, we have a 160 bet and a 244, and it's basically come up with kind of a 60-40 split to say you're going to be checking 60% of the time, and you're going to be betting this 244 sizing 37% of the time. But we don't have a lot of combinations to begin with, and it's just kind of sort of awkward, so to speak. So I think maybe one of the concepts here, if you are going to bet, you just have nut, or a big draw, and you're just willing to put in the bet, and you're just kind of gonna go with it, so to speak. So that's what we have here. We just run out of data. We just kind of sort of run out of data at this point. I think is probably best how I would describe it, and it just kind of becomes, there are some clear value bets that are probably balanced with some frequency. If I go ahead and do click this option here, square size proportional to weight, you can still see the strategy remains the same, just in terms of how the strategy remains the same in terms of how often we bet, check, and then what sizing we're using. But you can see the ace-10 suited, where I'm hovering over here, just is not very filled. So we don't get through to this actual point of the hand with these sizings, with this turn card, with a great number of hands. It's just the bucket of each cell is not filled. Certainly with 10-10, because we would have top set on the flop, and then of course turning about, we would go ahead and have 10s there very frequently. We would have 7s middle set there much more frequency. We would have some over pairs. We just don't have a lot of hands to this point. So I'm actually going to dial this back. Well, actually, I take that back. Let me just go ahead and do this right here. Let me just finish the actual analysis. 10-9 suited, 10-9 of hearts, the actual hand that Andrew had, is going to be a check 99% of the time, even though we don't have this actual hand that often in the spot, or at least in terms of how the actual line is constructed. We go ahead and go check. And then what was the actual card? It was going to be the 5 of spades that came off here. Okay, so there's check, check. Now, the out of position player certainly has. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I messed that up. I made a mistake. Went check, and then Andrew bet the 160 sizing. Apologies. So when we look at the out of position player, they're going to be, in their combinations, they're going to be folding 33% of the time. It's kind of another 60-40 spot where they're going to go ahead and be calling 60% of the time, and then they're going to have a real small sliver of their range that they're going to go ahead and be raising with 2.4 combos or 5% of the time. As played, you know, their top pairs, they had ace of diamonds, 10 of diamonds. It's just going to be a call almost all the time, 99.8%. You can look in that exact cell and see. So on and so forth. So this is kind of what the solver is saying they're going to go ahead and be doing. And then the raising, certainly raising for value with 10-10, 7-7. That's probably balanced out with the draws that are there. So balanced out with your straight draws that could come in. Certainly 9-8 suited that's here. And I think this certainly 10-10's for value, 7-7's for value. You have a small sliver of king queen suited that looks like it's going to be raising a very small. Okay, it's color coded here, but these are really small. These are like 5% of the 6% of the time, 5% of the time. So the raises out of here. So I think you certainly have a value combinations. You have some drawy combinations that are semi, and then you kind of have some bluffing combinations here that do retain or can improve against the actual range. But really, you're just going to be dumping off anything that's not a reasonable draw, or made hand at this point. So you can see what gets folded out. But in this case, bet, it goes call, 5 of spades runs off. Given the actual line, and you can kind of see I misclicked a little bit earlier going check check, and it showed some action for the out of position player in the river, but the hand as played as Andrew described it, out of position goes check, and then we can see finally check with the 10 of hearts, 9 of hearts is right here. We just don't have a lot of combinations that come here by this exact line, because again we do have the larger bet sizing up top, but there is some percentage of the time, and it looks kind of like, yeah, kind of sort of a 50-50 split between we bet to 2 various larger sizings, and then also check. So it's a 50-50 kind of balance spot, but then again as well too. We just don't have a lot of combinations because of the infrequency we get to this line, and then we have finally check check. So another way of looking at this, let's go ahead and just choose the different sizing that was there. So we'll go ahead and choose the 40 sizing. We'll go ahead and presume the out of position player calls. We'll go ahead and do the same turn card, which is 7. Out of position is still a check, but notice here one of the things that changes, we just simply have more combinations of hands with the smaller bet sizing. So you can see it's basically another 50-50 spot between the two sizes that we go ahead and use. In this case, actually, this is a spot where the solver would recommend about 50% of the time with the 10 of hearts, 9 of hearts, that we do go ahead and have a bet. It does not use. Let me see here. We're at a different pot size, so I think the sizing that Andrew might have used would be consummate with the 114 bet. Is that 50% of the time you would bet 114 or just a little over, just slightly over half pot. So you would bet. Because you do have a top pair, you do have a heart draw. Your hand does actually improve. Likewise as well too, we could actually go ahead and do the kind of similar operations. We could go ahead and look at the range explorer, break it down in terms of what we are doing with our betting combinations, the Eevee, so on and so forth. So, and also too, you can kind of pause the video and just kind of take a look around and digest kind of what's going on with the ranges here. And again, trying to be effective with time. So we'll go ahead and in this case, we'll go with the 114 bet. Basically all your top pairs are still calling. it looks to be kind of like a, again, 60-40 split where you do have some combos that you are raising. We went ahead and looked at this from a different perspective. You know, this looks pretty kind of a similar structure. You're raising the raising your 10-10, your boats, you're raising your quads at this point, and then also your draws as well, your draw hands as well too. But you do have combinations. You do have combinations here where, to a pretty reasonable frequency, you are going ahead. For example, the King of Hearts, Jack of Hearts, King of Clubs, Jack of Clubs. You are going ahead and raising those, certainly either as bluff or value. You kind of have a blended. I shouldn't say blended approach here across all your combinations. It's basically the calling, and then a small percentage of time you do raise with your clubs here, but yeah, your ace queen. So that's what it's doing. That's what it's doing here. So on and so forth, and then of course you have your your smaller full houses down here. But we'll go ahead and examine this line with the the call that's here, and then the actual river comes off 5 of clubs. So we still go ahead and we have a mostly check. There's some combination 9-8 suited that you could, let me see here, go ahead and bluff with. So it's kind of interesting that the solver would fire out a bluff with hands that were a potential draw to getting to this point. But we'll just presume check, and then we can see on the river here, certainly as the number of combinations we have starts to thin out, we just basically get to another kind of 50-50 spot where we have some sizings that represent a value component, and then another couple sizings that are going ahead and checking as well here. I'm not going to go ahead and break down the range explorer, but again, take an opportunity to look at an actual line, and then also how the tool kind of goes through and breaks down some of these ranges, gives recommendations or computations for bet sizings that can be used, so on and so forth. So again, this is just kind of a quick look to give you kind of a feel of how the tool looks and performs, and some of the things you can do with it for looking at an individual hand post flop, and some of the approaches that can be taken there. And then yeah, if there's any questions, concerns, ideas, please feel free to drop me a note. Take care, have a great day. Bye.